Welcome everybody to the Maurice Brown Show. We have a very special guest today, a promotions producer at WPLG Local 10 in Miami, director of stand-up programming at Villain Theater in Miami, Florida. And in 2020, she was selected the Miami News Best Comedian of 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, please welcome the very talented Anastasia Pavlinskaya. Hello, Anastasia.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Maurice. If I ever fight in WWE, I'm having you do my intro because that was amazing. I love that.
Well, after that intro, Anna, you've got to be ready to knock somebody's block off.
That's the Russian stereotype, but I can live up to it if they put me to it.
So, Anna, I appreciate you being on the show. And, you know, we're living in the midst of this pandemic, the COVID-19. And for comedians, it's really difficult because we can't do what we want to do. And it's been a long time. We were just talking before we came on live that I was actually down there in Miami. I performed at the Villain Theater, one of many stops I made, which was awesome. The vibe in Miami is awesome. Great place to do comedy. And a week later, I'm back in DC where I am now. COVID-19.
Yep.
I haven't been on stage since. What is the scene like down in Miami during this time?
The scene in Miami is actually having quite the renaissance, I will say, because a lot of the country closed and a lot of comedians were very bored. And some of them were very averse to virtual shows. So you have a lot of these people who are bigger names, who started to become smaller fish in a big pond. And now they came here and now they're a bigger fish in a small pond. So it's interesting because a lot of comedians like myself are now getting to work with a lot of these people who have years of experience. And in addition to that, in general, I feel like comedy, a lot of people are rediscovering themselves. A lot of people are spending time at home, spending time thinking about what they like and don't like. And that's basically the basis of comedy, is having an opinion on things. So I think between people coming to Florida, I think the existing scene was already a hotbed for it to happen. But between people coming to Florida and then also people taking up comedy, I think there has been a renaissance happening down here in Miami.
Now, what is the scene like in regards to the pandemic and people coming back out?
So Miami specifically, because I like to say the South Florida scene, if you look at South Florida as a whole, there's a Palm Beach scene and Palm Beach County. But I mean, when I started out, that's where I started out doing stand-up because I was living up more north. Then there's Broward, which kind of has a scene, but doesn't officially have a scene. That's the middle Sandwich County between Miami-Dade County and Palm Beach County. And then you have Miami. In Miami, there are a lot of places that do not care. Villain Theater, the club where I'm the executive producer of stand-up, they still are doing temperature checks. They're still doing masks when you're not eating and drinking. And not to say that many other places aren't, but I think the culture of South Florida is kind of just like the world is going to end anyways. That's just kind of the energy of the people in this area. So you do see, as people are going back out, people acting like they don't care that much because, which is not the case with all venues and not the case with all people. It's hard to generalize, but with the majority of general audiences, because I think Miami has that playground energy. People come here and they think that it's, Miami life, Miami vacation. You do have a lot of people who are not as hesitant as you would think down here.
Well, I think that you have to have a certain level of fearlessness to live in Florida because of the hurricanes. Like when I was down there, I saw guys on stage making jokes about category 2s and 3s and let's have a barbecue. As a kid, it's just a category 2. I mean, it's like, oh man, whoa. So And Florida has this stigma. I don't know whether it's a stigma or a reality, but there's this vibe down there where, COVID-19 is kind of like, I don't know, people just don't really seem to worry about it down there in the whole state.
Well, you know what? There's so many diseases in Florida already that they just, it's just like another one, there's all these different things. No, but I mean, the thing is, you have a mix of people. There is a purple state, and not to get political or anything like that, but there are a lot of people who they're like, it's my freedom to not wear a mask or whatever. And the degree of that type of energy is also there. But I do think with the hurricanes and all that stuff, there's alligators. I mean, Florida is basically, it's like Australia. Like it just has this energy of like, if you survive here, then you're golden. But also people like to hate on Florida when it's a very awesome place. Like it's gorgeous here. So it's funny because it's kind of like, Florida's kind of like the hot girl with bad opinions that people didn't like in high school. It's like the person where it's like, oh, you're cool. You're really pretty, but there's something about you that I don't like. And I think that's kind of the energy that Florida carries a little bit.
That is a great description.
Yeah.
That is a great description because, I mean, I can tell you right now, there is absolutely no reason to hate on Florida, Miami in particular. Doing comedy up here in the DC area in the winter, it gets really, really cold. And when I was there last in Miami, it was in the dead of winter up here. So, I mean, everybody was just having a blast. People come ready to laugh at the venues. So I just had an awesome time. There's no logical reason anyway to hate on Miami. But as you accurately stated, you do have that swath of people that kind of look down on it just because they're not having as much fun. Now,
period. Thank you.
It's just that simple. Now, what about Zoom shows and outdoors? How was that going for you guys down there?
So Zoom shows, well, you know how we spoke about earlier about how you came down to Miami.
Yeah.
And for us, March 13th, 2020 was the last in-person show that we had. And then March 17th, we had an online mic going. So throughout the pandemic, even up through, we reopened in October. And I think we ended up ending the virtual open mic sometime in December, because we transitioned to bringing back our in-person mic. But we kept virtual going for a long time. And Villain Theater really pivoted during the pandemic to do virtual shows specifically. I mean, obviously there are other people who are in the Miami community who did embrace that format, but not as much. I think I saw a little bit more of an embrace across the country, because I do think that everyone in Miami, it's like once it was 1 month, and they're like, okay, maybe this thing is getting serious, but I'll get to do comedy in 3 months. And then it's like 5 months into the pandemic. It's like, oh no, we're still here. Outdoor did not thrive as much as you would think, just because it was very hot in the summer following the pandemic came March. Then April, May started getting sweaty and rainy. So by the time that we would have had our outdoor shows in like December and that time, things were already starting to open back up. So we didn't have that much outdoor in my area per se, but online was definitely a huge thing. I mean, Villain had shows Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday the same way we had in person. And we pivoted back once we reopened. But I personally still do some virtual stuff. I mean, this is kind of virtual stuff. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, I actually think that whenever we get back to normal, which I hope is going to be relatively soon, at least I'm getting the vibe that it may be. But whenever we do, this platform is going to go with us. What's your opinion?
I completely agree. I think that especially a lot of people have developed their own virtual shows through this, which has been really cool because people have been enabled now so more than ever. I mean, at a greater scale, I'm a TV nerd. Prosumer technology has allowed the consumer to become the professional. And it started out with like cheaper cameras. But now, I mean, you have the capability to broadcast a whole show from your home. And for not that much overhead cost as it would be for a TV studio. So I do think that evolution will continue to still be there. I think that virtual open mics, I hope they stick around, because there's nothing better than being able to hit up an open mic at any time in the day, any point, any place in the world. I mean, I've done shows, and I'm doing a show actually coming up in Malaysia online, which is a 12-hour difference.
Wow.
Something interesting too is that I was able to do virtual shows in Russia in English, which I'm originally from Russia, and through virtual, I was able to now connect with the comedy scene over there, which I would have never done otherwise. Exactly. So I probably would have been way too intimidated otherwise. So it's cool because it made me personally realize that there are comedians all over the world. And I think that connection, especially in places that don't have as flourishing scenes, or people who are in wheelchairs, or people, who don't have cars and that kind of stuff. I do think it's an awesome platform and an awesome way to continue to do stand-up, even if, despite if they're able to in normal cases. So I think it'll continue to exist.
This is going to open up some new doors. I mean, as you were speaking about Russia, I've got new friends in comedy now, believe it or not, in Turkey, Holland, the UK, Switzerland, and who would ever think, just be sitting around one day and just imagine whether or not they're doing comedy in Switzerland. Nobody thinks that, but they're doing comedy over there. So
it's so funny because even Russia, I mean, I've had Russian people come to shows in Miami and be like, we didn't think that there would be any funny Russians. Russians aren't happy. So it's amazing because you would never think, but there are comedians everywhere, and it's such a universal experience. So I think for at least that sake, I do think that it will continue to exist, but evolve.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I just recently realized that American stand-up comedy is hugely popular around the world.
Yes.
And, the genre of stand-up comedy is just a different kind of way of storytelling. I mean, the way that it's done in the United States is unlike anywhere, and it seems to be the most appealing way to kind of carry on joke telling. It's extremely popular, and that's why you end up meeting people in Turkey and all over the place. It's like they're trying to emulate American comics.
Yeah, and because I find, for example, in Russia, they it's a lot more MC based and like sketch. It's a lot more like award show hosting, the way that a lot of comedy is in Russia, where they'll have a host and they'll have sketches and they'll tell anecdotes here and there, but it is quite different. That being said, I am very limited to my scope of exposure to comedy in Russia outside of the virtual world, just because, I picked up comedy here. It's different, but that is something that I have noticed, especially, from my parents and from the virtual stuff that I've done.
Now, Anna, you are the director of StandUp Programming at the Villain Theater in Miami, Florida. Tell us a little bit about that.
So at Villain Theater, I am actually, and it's slightly changed, but it's the same thing. I'm the executive producer of StandUp. Basically, what that role entails is that we have a lot of other producers under myself, but I help to consult with them with their lineups, the final say of, their show run order, marketing, flyers. I put up a lot of events on our website. Stand up, when I came to Villain Theater, it was existent in the open mic, which was a blended open mic with improv. And then there was an annual event every year called Stronger Than Yesterday, which was a women's comedy festival, which had improv, stand-up, etc. And that festival is actually still going on. But from that festival, a couple months later, we came up with the idea of Venus Night, which was our all women's stand-up showcase, which was our first stand-up showcase that we had running at Villain Theater. And that was about 2.5 years ago now, 3 years ago almost. And since then, I mean, we have completely exploded because between the stuff that I'm doing, booking like bigger names, like recently we had Monique Marvez, who's a legend with comedy. She's had Showtime specials. I mean, she was on the original Latin Divas of Comedy. We had Jimmy Schubert recently. I mean, what it entails is really curating the type of stand-up culture we have at Villain. So it was a lot of building the stand-up culture, but my role has changed because we have the culture now. So it's now, once it's evolved to this place, now where do we take it? And my role consists a lot with that, a lot of just bringing bigger headliners and trying to turn our little comedy club into a world-class venue.
So you were the Miami News 2020 Best Comedian, and you've been doing this for about, I think, 3 years.
Yes.
Which is pretty darn awesome to have such an accolade so early on in your career. I'm wondering, what is your, in 3 years is long enough to experience a lot of aspects of stand-up, one of which is dealing with hecklers. How do you do that exactly, Ana?
So I'm definitely a big person in punching up. So in dealing with hecklers, I like to give them a friendly energy. Like I'll mess with them and I'll call them out, but in ways that's useful to me. So a lot of times people will be like on their phones texting and I'm like, oh my goodness, look, this person is ordering their drinks thank you so much. You didn't know that you could order your drinks virtually or through the app on our phones. Yeah. So I try to pivot it into ways that's useful for me, but it really just depends on the situation. I mean, you really never know how you're going to deal with the heckler until it happens. But the biggest thing for me is that I find is very important is being clear-headed and being in the zone so that way you can think quick on your feet. And if someone comes at you with something, you have something quick to respond with for them and you can quell them in a way. I like to encourage them positively, especially when I'm at Villain, because I do have such an executive position there. I like to spin it in ways that's like, oh my goodness, I'm so happy that you're enjoying comedy so much. We have an open mic on Tuesdays to try to encourage them and to play with them.
Yeah.
But it just depends because sometimes those heckler moments are the most fun and you get to learn about people. And I honestly don't want to give too much of a moment to them, but it just depends on the circumstance because sometimes it's funny. Sometimes they're just people who are silly and you seek them out and you're like, they're really trying to be silly, but I can mess with them a little bit. But sometimes you're like, I'm not going to give this person the energy because I only have this much time up here and I want to do my thing. So it really is circumstantial. It just depends.
It does. And it's an unwelcomed skill set that you can add to your repertoire, which is actually, beneficial to you as an entertainer. You don't want it. You definitely don't want it, but you're forced to really positively figure out a way to quell that deal. Now you have some comics that will just destroy you.
Yeah, I'm no Steve Hofstetter. No, I'm no Steve Hofstetter or any of these other guys who have these heckle, they own the hecklers. Because for me, I mean, that's originally a reason why I didn't like a lot of comedy was because I don't like to feel like I'm bullying people, especially as someone who's also a comedic producer. For me, I see the business stake. So for me, I'm like, I don't want to make this person feel so horrible that they want to leave or do anything like that. But it is a craft because there are certain things. Like I remember when I had started out with stand-up comedy, I think a year and a half in or a year in, I was getting heckled by a comedian while I was hosting a show at a different venue. And they were saying very inappropriate things to me while I was up there, and I felt so uncomfortable, but I froze because it threw me off. So that's where it goes back to the quick-witted thinking, is because you never know, especially as a woman, what kind of things people are going to throw at you when you're up there. So it's important to just be in the zone. So for me, I don't drink before I go and perform. I try to just be as present as I can be. I've actually recently kind of started like meditating a little bit before I go up on stage, just because I want to be ready, because there's nothing worse, especially it's like in real life. If someone disses you in real life, it's the worst feeling when 2 hours later you go home and you're like, oh man, I should have said that to them. There's this funny thing or this witty thing I could have said to them to feel like I owned the situation. So that's basically that's how I've turned to it. But I know early on in comedy, it would throw me off and it would freak me out a little bit, because there are so many layers to it. I'm like, I'm a young woman. Like, what's the line? Where am I being playful, or where is it aggressive? All that stuff. So it's a skill that you build. And it's one of these things where I see people who are 30 years in to doing comedy, and I see the way that they handle it, and it's just like butter. So I think you could be so funny with your content at the beginning, but that sort of stage etiquette is something that you just continue to grow every single time you go up on stage.
I totally agree, and just like you said about being in the zone, I know for myself personally, I'm in such a deep zone that when someone starts up, I for whatever reason, I'm able to kind of fold that would-be heckler, and I do mean would-be, because 90% of the time they think they're helping. They're not really trying to be mean.
Probably
had a drink or two too many, whatever. They're just hyped. And I'll fold them in to my routine very quickly, and they'll feel like they got their 15 seconds of fame, and they'll sit down. Like, oh, I helped.
Because a lot of people just want attention. And sometimes something that I even struggle with, and obviously, I'm 3 years in, so I'm still learning every single day. And something I struggle with is realizing sometimes, or always actually, when you're a comedian, it's not really about you. It's about them. It's about the audience. They're there for their birthday, their girls' night out, their date night, all that stuff. And you're there to make them feel like they're related to and that they're human beings in a lot of ways. So even sometimes with me, like some of my comedy is not always that relatable, because I talk about my Russian immigrant experience and all that. And it's finding that balance, but then also realizing that you have to also interact with the audience to an extent. Like, you can have crowd work that's not crowd work. It's just a way it's smooth. And it's a way that's part of your routine. But the audience does like to participate sometimes, and you can't blame them, because that's their night out. It's like you make people sit down for 2 hours and just be like, shh, that's it. Oh, sorry. Shh, that's it. You're like a teacher. So there's a fine line between being the teacher up on stage and being like, everyone stop talking, it's my time, versus being like the parent at the dinner table, in a sense, where it's kind of making people feel like, okay, we respect each other. And I think that, especially as a host, which I would encourage other hosts, and I see other hosts do this, it's important to make everyone feel like they're a family at the very beginning. So that way, even if you do kind of catch them in their moment, and you flip them, they feel like it's like, okay, I'm doing it for the good of the family and for the good of everyone. And I'm there, so we're enjoying this together. So I think, people are going to heckle, especially in Miami. People love to drink. They love to talk. So
yeah, they absolutely do. Let me ask you this, Anna. You've been in for about 3 years, but certainly you've seen a lot of stuff on stage. Let me ask you this: what is it that you have seen, experienced, witnessed as a comedian that was kind of like a game changer? Like, it was like, oh, wow. It kind of like took your comedy game to another level. It made you a better comedian. What was that moment that for you? What was it that you have seen or experienced that you've learned from comedy that's made you better?
So an experience that I've learned from comedy that's made me a better person overall, or a better comedian?
Let's just say comedian.
Well, I will say, so I was talking about the drinking thing, I definitely in my life I'm a Russian. So it's stereotypical, we're drinkers, all that stuff. And I actually went completely cold turkey. And because I had an experience where it's like I had maybe like a little bit to drink. But the thing is, people, if you have anxiety, you have to live with the anxiety and deal with it versus drinking or doing other libations, because that just enhances the anxiety. So it just gets worse. So for me, having one of those moments where I was like, wow, I feel like I'm a little anxious. This is heightening my anxiety. And making that switch has made me a way better comedian. Because at the end of the day, I feel like that's a professionalism thing. You go out there and you're clear-headed, you're at your job, you shouldn't be thinking of it like as a party, as a hangout. And I definitely think that for me, although not everyone is going to go cold turkey with drinking, period, I definitely think that that's something that has been a big shift in my comedy because of just my professionalism, my ability to be quick-witted and quick thinking. Other things that have happened to me on stage that have been a change is I've realized in moments where I flow more conversationally, where I focus on just doing like one or two jokes versus being like, I'm going to do XYZ set list. I've realized that has helped me too, because I'm a lot more conversational. And one of the things that I deal with that is kind of one of my problematic tendencies and habits that I have when I perform is that I can be a little bit too presentational because of my background in broadcast journalism and all of that stuff. So in doing that and trying to just slow down and trying to focus, I've been a lot better of a comic. I feel like even though a lot of the accolades that I received were prior to these shifts in my life, I feel like in the time that I've had those shifts, that's been so significant. So for me, I'm always looking on how I can improve internally based on my external experiences. And those are some of the things that have made drastic changes for me.
I totally agree with you. The last thing a comedian needs to do before they step on that stage is to have a drink. Because if you want to be and I've heard Steve Martin talk about this before, because you have to be present.
Yes.
In the moment, it's of the utmost importance that you are present in the moment. And if you develop a rhythm of being inebriated, and then all of a sudden when you're asked to just go up there and you can't because you don't know how to do it sober, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And Steve Martin, he alluded to that. He said, I had to stop because I wasn't being Steve Martin, the professional. That's who needs to be on that stage.
Yeah.
So I like what you said. It's like you've got to be in the moment. You've got to be ever present. The last thing you need is a drink of alcohol before you go on that stage. You got to be on your game.
And I think the other thing to balancing out that, I actually read his book, The Born Standing Up. So it's sad a little bit because he's like, this is why I quit stand up a little bit. But I think there's a professionalism thing that happens, and especially in scenes like Miami where it's so close to being a bigger scene. The one thing that Miami lacks is paid gigs. In regards to like TV, like there's not much. If you're a full-time comedian, like you can't write for a TV show or anything like that. There's not a lot of that down here. And I think that having that in LA or New York, for example, or Atlanta or something like that, having that umbrella over your head of like, oh, okay, well, I need to make sure that I'm professional because I'm networking. Like this is a professional thing. I think that sometimes in Miami and other scenes, people don't have that as much because there isn't that professional standard. So people just kind of make it more of a hangout. And it's so easy to just make it a hangout because as adults, it's hard to make friends and it becomes part of your friend times too. There's nothing wrong with being friends with comedians. I love being friends with comedians. I have many friends, but there are moments where you have to be like, my business hat is on. And Maurice, I know you are a man of your hats. So, it's like, you have to have your moment where it's my business cap is on and I'm on it. I'm on my game. I'm here to do my thing. And you become a better comedian and a better negotiator with bookers too, because I've booked people. I've seen it on the other side. It's amazing because I think every comedian should learn how to be a good booker because you learn how to be the best comedian that you would want to book. So for me, I've had comedians who are so funny and so amazing and they have accolades and they're talented, but I've seen them get very sloppy on stage because they've been drinking too much or they treat it as like it's every other gig. Like they have 10 gigs in a row. So this is like not as big of a gig as maybe the improv or whatever. And it's those moments matter because all those little things matter. They all build up. It's a job just like any other job. It's just a lot harder to make money in it.
Well, that's what a lot of comedians need, especially the younger ones who are really good. Like you said, that's what needs to be learned still. It's like, even if it's just an open mic, whatever it is, whenever you go to perform, you're going to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, this is not like everybody else, your buddies and whatever. That's for them. You are here to work, do your job. And that's something that a lot of younger comedians in particular have got to learn. And as we talk about younger comics, let me ask you this. By the way, this has been a great conversation, Anna. I appreciate you being on the Maurice Brown Show.
Thank you so much. I love it.
Is there any advice that you could possibly leave with young comedians that are contemplating making this their career?
So I will say I am one of those young comedians who's always contemplating making this my career because I have a day job. I still have my life. And I mean, those things do combine. But I do think taking it seriously is the first step. I think sharpening all the tools in your belt is important. So finding out how to, take some improv classes, try doing some writing classes, write every day. I mean, treat it like it's an assignment and find a way to hack yourself. Because, for example, I am undiagnosed ADHD. I have a procrastination problem. A lot of these things that plague creatives. So I have to find ways to hack myself and to find myself to be like, this is going to be 30 minutes that I dedicate to write. And then that's it. So that being said, I would find just ways to sharpen your tools, find the tools that are, strong enough already. So for example, get them to a mediocre level. So I'm not a good singer, but I took singing classes, not because I wanted to become Beyonce, because I will never be Beyonce for a multitude of reasons. That is physically impossible. But because what if I want to do just like a bit where I sing for 30 seconds? I want to be able to sound decent and not make people run out of the theater and demand their money back. So I think finding that these things are not mutually exclusive, finding ways to just continuously sharpen yourself, find your scene, go to the open mics, find out who's running the open mics, find out if they have booked shows, and just continue to build yourself, build your website. Like there's no reason why it's so cheap to have a domain nowadays. There's no reason why you can't put something up because it just makes you look so much more legit. So I think a lot of those things, basically, if you're going to try to start out any job, you're going to do a lot of those things. You're going to try to educate yourself. You're going to try to empower yourself by giving yourself the time to get good. And you're going to try to educate and spread yourself. You're going to try to put your name out there. So the last thing I would say is make it known. I think with everything, you have to tell people what you want in this world. So as soon as I said I was going to do comedy, I put it everywhere out there on Facebook and all that stuff. And people, you'll hear older comics or, more seasoned comics be like, oh, it's so annoying when an open mic comedian does like an open mic, and then they start making all their Facebook statuses that they're a comedian now. But for me, I think that's great. They're holding themselves accountable to the rest of the world. And for someone like me who is a procrastinator or will not always be accountable to myself, social accountability is super important to me. So I think finding those ways, if a social accountability is the thing that works for you, then do that too. But put it out in the universe and just get good, genuinely get better.
Love it. Great advice. Great advice. And with that being said, Ana, how can fans follow you on social media or contact you for booking?
So my Instagram is at Ana the Russian with one N. And I also am the co-host of a podcast called Just the Facts Podcast, which can be found on all of the platforms. I co-host it with my friend Ashley Diaz, who is a comedian in Los Angeles. Those are two places where you can find me, more of me. We talk to different comedians, not to cannibalize on your show, but if people do like to hear from comedians, that's another place where they can hear from them. But I'm always available at Ana the Russian and also AnastasiaProductions.com.
Anastasia Pavlinskaya on the Maurice Brown Show. Thank you so much, Ana, for being a part of the show. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've been enjoying this interview and you like it, you've enjoyed it, like it and share it and subscribe to the Maurice Brown channel on YouTube. If you came in late and you went, oh, I missed it. Hold on. You can watch the replay this evening on the Creative Motion Network on Roku TV, and that's going to be posted at about 6 p.m. So if you missed it, don't worry. You can see the whole thing on Roku TV. Ana Pavlinskaya out of Miami, Florida on the Maurice Brown Show. Ana, once again, thank you so much for being on the show, and may the peace of the Lord be with you and your family. God bless you.
Thank you.